Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really wonderful guest today. Her name is Therese Tucker. She's a self-empowerment coach, a psychic medium, and an author. And we're going to talk about intuition today, which I'm super excited about. So thank you so much for being here today, Therese.
Absolutely. It's my honor, Sarah. I would love talking about this. I could talk about this all day. So I'm always excited when I get to be on someone's podcast and talk about these topics.
You know, we already talked a little bit. We did like a discovery call, and I already know that you and I could talk about this subject and probably many, many more. So
Yes.
we definitely are on the same page. Why don't we start with just sharing a little bit about yourself to their listeners, who you are, your not necessarily your background yet, but just kind of like what you offer.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a business. It's called Blythe Starlight, and it's sort of it's a multifaceted business because it's also to do with coaching, but there's also metaphysical jewelry and energy work that I do. So I have a lot of different things, but predominantly I am a psychic medium and a channel. I also am a self-empowerment coach that works with women predominantly to help them get out of self-doubt and into self-trust so that they can tap into their intuition at a deeper level and get more clarity in their lives and businesses. So that's what I work on with people individually. I also host what's called the Spirit Circle, and I do this every new moon and full moon, and it's a time for people to gather together. We look at the energy of the cosmos, like the messages that the cosmos is giving us through astrology and numerology, and then we do some ritual work around that, and also psychic Q&A. And I'm also a meditation teacher on Insight Timer app. So if you guys have that Insight Timer app, you can follow me there. You can find me as Therese Tucker, or you can look up Blythe Starlight, which is also my handle there. But I do meditations. I'm going to be offering courses, and I also do live events on that platform so that I can work with people all over the world in whatever time zone that you're in, which I'm really excited about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always give the floor to those I have as guests because I know that I could never introduce the way that you guys can. You know what I mean? Like you, especially you have a lot going on, and you have a
There's a
lot of.
lot going.
It's very cool, and especially sharing. So anyone who's like, oh, okay, I want to learn more and I want to hear more. So now I'd love to ask, how did you find this work? I'm a big fan of backstories, especially when you look back and you can like see the breadcrumbs and see how things happened perfectly to get you where you are now. And so I would just love to, how did you find this work? And, like, how did you grow up? And was this something that you were always drawn to, or was it something that found you later? What is
Yes. So from a very young age, I remember being able to see and interact with spirit. At the time, I didn't know that this was something that was sort of unique. I didn't realize that wasn't everyone's experience. And a lot of times they would come at night, that there'd be a being standing in the doorway, and that really freaked me out. So it wasn't something that I felt fully comfortable with. But I do remember when I was young talking to the fairies. I remember seeing them and seeing these like little beings and having conversations with them. And as I got older, that part sort of faded. Like I stopped seeing it so much. And it wasn't really a focus. It was always, Therese has a great imagination. I was always told that I had this wonderful imagination, and that's kind of what I thought it was. Growing up, I was not really in a religious family, although religion was around my family. My mom came from a very religious family, very Catholic family. So did my dad. And my mom was sort of a religious rebel. Like it wasn't jiving with her. She needed to go find the answers because it wasn't relevant for her. It felt very oppressive. And so I'm kind of the daughter of somebody who rebelled from traditional religious structures, which meant that I got to explore things at a very young age that I don't know if a lot of people did explore, because either they were sort of in a a situation where the whole family had a belief structure, and that was just the belief structure they followed. My mom was sort of trying to find hers, and in the process I got to go with her. So at a very young age I went to psychics. I was getting card readings for myself at the age of 7. I remember feeling scared about going to psychics because I was afraid they would read my mind and know, like, the naughty things I did, like the cookies I took or something. I was terrified that they were going to like see into my soul. And so I was fascinated by it, but also a little nervous about that idea. And the older I got, that sort of dissipated. I remember my mom started listening to A Course in Miracles lectures with Marianne Williamson, and I was about 15 at the time. And I remember she had it on while she was cooking dinner, and it just, all of a sudden what I was hearing was like, this is the truth. This is the truth that I've known in my soul the whole time. And I just remember sitting down at 15 and just listening to these. And I would take my mom's tapes and play them in my room while I was like drawing and stuff like that, and just listen to them over and over, and be absorbing these messages. And my mom and I would have really interesting conversations about like parallel dimensions and other timelines, and like the idea that, this, like my mom would say things like, this pillow could be you on vacation in another dimension. And I'd be like, what? And it was always these jokes about, every time we see pillows, that's me on vacation in another dimension. But it was just so normal and natural to have these kinds of conversations that were very mind expanding. And, if you're familiar with A Course in Miracles, that work is very much about sort of breaking down the illusions of reality and kind of recognizing that we're sort of living in a type of simulation, and how to set yourself free from the ego self so you can move into your higher self. So these are pretty lofty concepts for a 15-year-old to kind of listen to and absorb. Again, didn't realize that that made me kind of different or weird. It was just what I did. And I remember I was telling you yesterday, I went to a very religious high school that was a public school. I don't know why it was so religious, but all the popular kids were super religious. And so just by nature, the school community, I guess you could say, the socialization at school had a kind of this weird religious bent. And I never fit in. Like, people had a weird feeling about me. And I learned later that they thought I was a witch, which, looking back, I find hilarious, because there was nothing I was doing that I could see that would kind of create that energy or that impression. Like, I wasn't goth. I didn't bring tarot cards to school. I maybe talked about things from a more esoteric or metaphysical point of view. I had a very metaphysical point of view at that age. So maybe that's what they were picking up. But I just remember getting that stigma that I was some kind of a witch. And like, of course, later in life, I truly enjoyed that. Back then, I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And then just moving forward, I went to college for a fine arts degree. I have my BFA in theater and acting, and that was my real passion at the time, which led me to New York and working there. And over there, I remember I had teachers who were also very intuitive. They were acting teachers, but they could tell something was going on with me. And they would ask me, to set me aside and say, could you do some energy work for me? And we would have these very long conversations, and I would be getting paid to do this energy work and read for people's situations. And again, this was sort of when I would say I was in the psychic closet. I wasn't really open about this, but I also remember leading people. Like, I had groups of friends, and we would all get together, and they would all kind of go into a trance state while I'd lead them through visualizations and take them on these healing journeys. And this is just what I did for fun. And it kept happening. And I really wasn't getting it, that maybe this is what I'm here to do. Maybe the acting really was more of a vehicle to get me to meet the people I needed to meet. Again, kind of like oblivious to it, or in denial, or feeling like, I remember having this sort of stigma that this wasn't open to everybody. Only the special could do this work. And I never saw myself as the special, right? So it was something I sort of held myself apart from, because I wasn't given permission in a way to do it, but it was coming out of my pores. It was just something that I did naturally. And I remember when I started to awaken, there's sort of an activation that everybody goes through when they start awakening. And for me, it was the numeric sequences would not stop happening. Every single time I would look at a clock, it would be 111 222, 333, 4. I mean, every single time. And this was around 2008. And I just remember thinking, this is odd. And then I started getting lots of dimes, and I'd find dimes everywhere. Dimes would be, I'd go to sleep and my bedside table, there would be nothing. I'd wake up, there's a dime. And I found out that that's usually messages from spirit on the other side. That's a little reminder that they were there. And it was happening so much. And then, of course, I ended up having my first child. And that again took me away from focusing on this. It wasn't something I thought I was supposed to do. So I wasn't honoring all the things that were happening. It wasn't till about 2013 where I ended up taking a course that was about developing your intuition and manifesting ability, and realizing that I was more advanced than what the course was offering. But the one thing that was keeping me back is I wasn't giving myself permission to be what I am. And I was waiting for someone to give me that approval. And there were people who were giving me approval, which allowed me to find that courage, the self-trust and self-belief. I remember the day I wrote down, I teach self-trust, and circling it over and over, because that was the one thing that was keeping me apart from a big part of my destiny that has been following me around my entire life. But I was too scared to own it. And I really believed like somebody had to appoint this to you, that they had to like grant you permission to be an intuitive, to be a psychic. Otherwise, my fear was, I'm a fraud, I'm an imposter, this isn't real. When I started owning it, that's when my life sort of cracked open. I got tested at that point, which does happen to people. You meet some of your greatest catalyst, which is meant to sort of show you the path forward for you. And I remember getting the message that you're playing too small. And I didn't know what that meant at the time until I went through this eviction process that happened, and it was about 2015. I had my second child. He was only like 9 months old at the time. And we went through it. And the big reason was I was trying to do a business, and I was not putting myself out there. I remember I am an artist as well. So I had an Etsy shop and I was selling art, and it was just I was making these little decorative matchboxes that I would put hours of time into, and then I'd sell them. I'm not kidding, 2 for $5 on Etsy. I was not making any money back. And I didn't see that I was being small. I thought I was being brave and courageous because I was making something and putting it out there. And I didn't realize like how much time and effort I put into something, and then I wasn't asking for anything back. So there was a lack of confidence, a lack of self-trust, a lot of confusion. And the answer was like in my face, but I wasn't accepting it because I was afraid that if I did, that I would be claiming something that wasn't mine. And all of that got busted open with that eviction. I was forced to face either that I need to stop everything I'm doing here and really put it down, or I need to put all of my heart and soul into what I'm putting out in the world. And I remember that was a sort of initiation into manifestation. Is it real or not? And I remember thinking like, I was told we were having trouble with this apartment. We were having trouble making these payments. We were working with the lawyers. Nothing was working. And finally, we got to the point where they're like, you have to move out in 6 hours. And I have like a little baby and a 4-year-old. And I remember my husband panicking and looking around the apartment going, what do we have to leave behind? Like he's just in pure fear mode. And I remember getting this really strong feeling to go sit down and meditate, just go sit and meditate. So I sat there and I meditated for 20 minutes, and they were like, stay there until the answer comes. So I did. The answer came in 20 minutes. I followed all the instructions as I was told to via my team. I turned 6 hours into 6 days. After that 6 day period, we were living in hotels. I remember being technically homeless in a swimming pool at a hotel going, I'm technically homeless right now, yet I feel like I'm on a vacation. It was really weird. And I just every day would focus in on like, this is what I'm creating. This is what I'm creating. This is what I'm intending. I got really specific. I got really clear. I got really vigilant about how I was thinking. And I turned that experience into a miracle where we were able to get into a home, get resettled within a 2 week period and sort of find our grounding again. But it took, I remember there were nights during that 2 week period where it was like, at the end of the day, we're out of cash and we might not be able to have a room for the next day. And I would do my manifesting and I would be like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I know you're going to help bring me the funds I'd need to be able to sustain this for at least one more day. And then someone would order a reading, a couple more people would, and by the end of the day, I'd have the money and then book the room again. So it was a wild experience, but it was what I needed because it was in front of my face for so long and I kept rejecting it. I kept pushing it away and saying that I don't deserve this for some reason or another, right? My belief system was blocking it. And so they were like, well, we're going to have to totally like annihilate your self-limiting beliefs by forcing you to believe in it so that you can see that this is real. This is what you were supposed to be doing and why you should be living from that perspective versus the perspective you were living in before. And then from there, really, that's where Blythe Starlight and everything I do there started to take off because I had finally claimed everything and I had allowed myself to own my gifts rather than waiting for someone, some arbitrary person to give me permission to be who I am.
Wow, that is truly an amazing story and background. And there's so many, it's so interesting too, because I'm seeing a ton of similarities with my own journey. And I feel like I'm not in the detrimental place that you were per se, but I've definitely been feeling a lot of that, just own it. And I've been struggling with that too. So I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much there. And so I can't wait to dive in and get, do more questions. I love how you were sharing how when you were younger and you saw burial to you, like you didn't know that no one else was seeing that either. And I've talked to a few other people who said the same thing. It was just their normal. Yeah, there's someone in my room when I go to bed. You don't see that too?
Exactly.
And so I just find it so fascinating, because I didn't have that experience. I do think that I was intuitive, but not in that sense. You know what I mean? Like I had some cool experience when I was younger, but it wasn't like, it was really, unless I'm just not remembering everything, it was more like once or twice. And it wasn't a scary experience. It was more of a, whoa kind of experience, but it was also when I was like 4 or 5 and a lot of times I just chalked it up to my own imagination. So, but when I talk to people who are naturally more plugged in and, hear their experience of like, oh yeah, I just thought everyone else saw it too, until I realized that no, it's just me. And maybe I should, not talk about it. And I think that that's where a lot of that suppressing comes from, because you realize it sounds crazy, or in your case, oh, I just have a big imagination. It's not real. When in fact, you're like, maybe it actually was real. And actually now I know it is, now that I know it was. And I love when you mentioned how you would get fearful of seeing a psychic and being afraid that they could read your mind. That actually makes me think of my own Christian upbringing, because that's how I felt about God.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, very different in the sense that you only had to feel that way when you were in the presence of a psychic. For me, it was like all day, every day, or when I'd pray or whatever else. It really kind of felt like this old man, like watching my every move and judging me and always mad at me. And, I never really like acknowledged that. But once you like compare that to the psychic thing, I was like, I can relate, but in a completely different sense. And I think that that's what broke me away from Christianity, was just this idea of someone always watching and judging. It just didn't feel right to me. And I think it's so beautiful that you were given this opportunity to really soak in messages that I 100%, I haven't followed the Course of Miracles. So I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar with it, but it seems like a lot of our spiritual beliefs are pretty similar. And for me, like once I plugged into that, it was like, it just felt like, yes, this is it. And it sounds like you were naturally do that at an age where you didn't have those limiting beliefs that I think a lot of religious people do. You know what I mean? You were kind of like an open canvas. So you're able to just soak in what felt right to you in a way that made it very real.
Yeah, I remember. So just, I mean, I've always been around religious people and I don't have, I've always felt that there are 1,000 pathways to the way home. So whatever resonates for you personally is the right path for you. I would never assume that my way of viewing the world or my way of connecting with source is the way. It's a way. But I do remember on my journey to becoming who I am today, there were a lot of things early in childhood too. I remember I was at church with my family, and I remember this being very young because I only went when we were young. My parents divorced right before I turned 5. So I must have been about 4 at this point. And I still do have very early memories here and there. I can remember incidents from 3. I even remember incidents as an infant, which is kind of odd, but I do remember them. But we were at church and I was hearing the priest talking, and he was given his lecture about how God's disappointed in you, and you've sinned and you have to change and all. And I just remember going, no, he doesn't. Like, God loves us. That was my first thought, was God loves us. This isn't true. And I just kind of tuned him out. And of course, like, the people around me I'm so young, right? So they were like, kids will be kids. Another incident I remember was being on the bus when I was in 2nd grade, and a little girl saying on the bus that we are all humans are brothers and sisters together. And I was like, yes, like that was so true. Like hearing that we're all connected. There's nothing that separates us. When she said that, I didn't have the words at the time for it, but it's like an arrow going through my heart where it's just like, zing, yes, exactly. And in A Course in Miracles, the lectures that I was listening to, the whole point is that God, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, this is love. And it's not outside of you watching you, it's in you. You are a part of it. You are deeply connected to it. I'm a person who wants to connect with God or source within. I want to recognize the power is within me. And then I recognize the power in every living thing I see. I'm looking at God right now. When I'm looking at you, I'm looking at God. When I look at this tree, I'm looking at God. When I see my cats, there's God again. Like God's everywhere. I love that feeling. And really one of the core principles in A Course in Miracles that they teach is that everything is love. God is love. And that the antithesis of love isn't hate, it's fear. And I thought, yep, that's resonant for me too. That makes so much sense. It's not because we tend to hate what we fear, but it's fear is at the core of it. And they talk about how the ego is really driven by fear. And so part of it is sort of overcoming this impulse, which is our ego inside of ourselves that wants to let fear rule us. And kind of going back to my story, you can see in the story I told you about my journey that fear really had a grip on me when it came to my own gifts and abilities, that I really was timid and waiting for that permission. And I can't even tell you who the permission was supposed to come from, but it was sort of like, I'll know it when I get it. And I never got it. All along the way, I had friends validating me. I had teachers validating me. I had clients validating me. And yet still I'm waiting for this permission from some source that I don't even know yet.
So I'm right there with you as far as like, I 100% believe that people need to follow the faith that calls to them, so it's like, it's not a one size fits all, in my opinion. It's whatever works for each individual. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of, God is love. And I 100% believe that, because once you put fear, then there's judgment and there's separation, whereas love is like all connection. And there's this anagram that I just love, or not anagram. I think I don't know. It's I can't think of the word, where each letter means a word. It's not anagram.
Oh my gosh. Now, no, I don't have it. I know it starts with an A, but I can't remember.
I know it too. But basically, there's 2 ways to look at fear. Forget everything and run. In the forget everything and run, that's where there's separation. That's where there's that, judgment and all the things. But when you face everything and rise, that's when you're really setting your ego aside to get curious and to see where it takes you. I can really relate to everything you're saying too about how you're waiting for permission. And it's so ironic, but I feel like that's where I'm at right now. Even though I have plenty of validation, I've done enough readings for people and seen plenty of positive feedback from strangers to people who know me too. And yet I'm still kind of like, yeah, but is that really it? Am I still, but I think exactly what it is you're looking for that permission for yourself. And I've known that for a while now. So this isn't logically, I get it. But, I still haven't fully, that's probably been my biggest, like, I feel like that's why I was called to start this podcast in a way, is because it's forcing me to publicly talk about what I do in a way that's confident and, help me like, get that to sink in. But yeah, so and it's so cool because I see people like you and others who have gone through that transition of I doubted myself, and then I owned myself and doors open. And I'm like, how do you get from A to B? Because I see it like on the map, but I don't know how to. So maybe we could talk about that today, but in like the sense that I feel like I'm one step behind.
Yeah. So what I see it as is actually like a sequence of gateways rather than one big moment. Because at least that's been my experience, is there's usually multiple glass ceilings that you have to break through. So it's not so much like I break through it once and I'm free. It's more like I break through this level and I'm good up until, oh, I just hit the next level. Now I have to make the choice again. And you'd think that going through it once, you'd be like, okay, next time I hit the level, I'm just going to bust through. And no, your self-limiting beliefs can be very strong and convincing. And so it can take a while. And it usually is for most of us, we're not really super aware that that's the limit, right? We're not always like, I'm just waiting for permission. That's not usually the thing that comes up. Usually it's a bunch of excuses or reasons why, or like, here's some evidence. When I said I wanted to do this, for example, I love my mom. My mom's very supportive, but I remember interpreting some look she gave me when I made a statement to her as she doesn't think I should do this. I remember I was listening to Marianne Williamson, who does lectures on A Course in Miracles, and she was really a mentor for me at that time. And I remember like it was like a zing in my heart again. I'm like, I want to do this. This is the role that I want in my life. And I went and told my mom, and she kind of looked at me in a way like her or you or like that, like kind of just like questioning, not like go for it, but and I interpreted all of that to mean the subtext I got out of it is like, who do you think you are to think you could do this? And so that was the internal dialogue I carried with me, was this sort of shame about wanting this because I hadn't proven myself. I hadn't earned it, or again, I wasn't the chosen or the special. And so therefore, now meanwhile, Marianne Williamson's backstory, which she talks about frequently, was, her low was she was addicted to drugs, and like pretty badly, and it kind of hit the low and found A Course in Miracles, which changed the trajectory of her life. So when I actually stop and get analytical about it, there was nothing about her story where she was like anointed by something and had a perfect life, and so therefore it gets to be a messenger. No, it was because this was the material that helped her get out of her own way. It helped her get out of her addiction. It helped her get out of some negative self-thinking and limiting beliefs in her own life, so much so that she had to go and share that message. Now when I look at that from that point of view, I'm like, well, why couldn't I do it? But at the time, again, I interpreted it as, who do I think I am to want this? Like it was some kind of like ego thing instead of a real true desire to be a messenger as well, in whatever way I can be. I mean, I truly believe that we're powerful individuals. I believe that we are the creators of our own reality and our destiny. And that takes a lot of courage and responsibility to claim that, but that's where all the power is in our life. Now, doing the work I do, I realize that I feel responsible, like, to share that. Whether it resonates for someone or not is not my business. It's really to share that and reach at least one person who needs to hear that message right now, so that they'll claim their power back and create the life they desire, rather than being afraid that they're never going to have it.
Yeah, that all makes sense too, because and the way that I see it is, we're always evolving. So of course there's always another thing
Yep.
to overcome. And so and that does check out too, because while I am sitting here going like, I'm still afraid to own it, I have come a long way. If you saw before, I became an own being a tarot reader and stepped in. So I mean, I can see that. I've definitely pushed through glass ceilings. I think I'm pushing up against another one. That's one thing that we have in common is I feel like one of the things that I love to put out there, and I'm getting closer to like really aligning with it, that yes, I do tarot readings, yes, the tarot readings help guide people, but ultimately my goal every time I sit down with someone is to remind them that they're in charge. I'm not all knowing. I'm not, and even when I do readings, I don't like to do predictive readings. I'll tell them like energetically where they're heading as of right now, but I remind them like, hey, the future is still yours. You create that. This is just kind of this is the energy you're playing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to remind them that they have way more power than they think they do. That, when they come to me, it's more to remind them that they already know the answers within them. And then being brave enough to just do that and share that. And so I feel like it's probably the glass ceiling I'm working on breaking through right now is the ego, because the ego is saying like, oh my gosh, who do you think you are? I'm not a spiritual teacher. I don't do certain things yet. Maybe I will, but it's like there's no barrier between the person you're speaking about, who you're just, in awe of. There's no separation. If she can do it, you can do it. I can do it. It's the removing those inner dialogues that try and say otherwise.
I have to tell you something, because I did get validation, and it took me years to absorb it because of my self-limiting belief. But I actually got to meet Marianne Williamson. I went to a book reading she was doing. It was at a Unity church in Seattle. We got to go up and have her sign the book. And as soon as I got up to the table, I was 19 at the time, and I burst into tears. And I was like sobbing. I'm almost going to cry now, but I said to her, I want to be just like you someday. And she got up from the table, came around, hugged me, and said, you already are. I'm just older. And I really hope that I get to pay that forward someday to somebody who needs to hear it.
It's bringing me to tears.
Yeah.
So, and that goes to show like that's the difference between someone who's out there putting out messages from an ego position and someone that's doing it really just out of love and doing it out of, I'm truly here to build you up. Right. Because I'm building myself up by building you up. It's that, you know what I mean? I love that. That is amazing.
And you'd think that would be the one that just opened all the door and gave me all the permission in the world. I remember I had to actually sort of go into I think Abraham Hicks would refer to it as their workshop. I kind of feel like it's a mental gym. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek. I know Star Trek: The Next Generation was sort of like when you were really little. But on that show, they had something called the holodeck, which was a holographic realm where you could like plug in a program and it would make the scenario that you're asking for. So it'll immediate, like if they wanted to pretend to be Sherlock Holmes, it would bring up like 1900s, early 1900s London or something like that, and so they could pretend that. So in a way, there's like sort of this inner realm I had to go to, where I sort of put these negative thoughts I had on trial. And I imagined there was a judge there, and I'm like, these are the negative thoughts. This is where they came from. This is how I interpret it. And they were like, what proof do you have that these thoughts are true? And I had to like research my own mind and go, I don't really have any proof. And then they were like, well, we also have these thoughts here. Here's Marianne Williamson, the person that you saw as mentor, talking to you, giving you permission. Why does that have no weight in your mind, but all of these negative thoughts that have no proof have weight? And as soon as I sort of did that exercise, I realized I can't really believe in it, because it's not a fantasy, but it's a delusion that I'm believing in. This self-limit is a delusion. I actually have more evidence in reality that I can do this than not. And once I sort of put those thoughts on trial, I was able to sort of bust through it because, yeah, I was like, there's no evidence to support this belief that I'm holding. It's simply here and it's blocking me, or I use it in some way. My ego lets me use it as an excuse to not move forward and not, put myself out there, because what if I fail? It's like, don't fail. Don't be bad at this, because then you're going to be just humiliated and your whole life's going to end. That's what your ego would tell you. And so it keeps you from doing it. And it uses these negative thoughts that are usually not based in anything other than how you interpreted information that you received. You saw something and someone went, oh, what a great imagination. So you downgraded it from real to imaginary. You said you wanted something and someone gave you the side eye and you went, oop, I shouldn't want that because I'm being judged for it, right? So these are the way that we build the limiting beliefs. And we do have to, at some point, kind of put them under a microscope or put them on trial and say, what validity do these actually have? And I find that when we do that, it forces us to get into reality, because we're in a delusion when we believe them. We're not actually facing reality. We're facing something we built up for ourselves. That's the glass ceiling, right? And as soon as you realize there's no actual evidence to support these claims that my ego makes, it's so easy to break through, because you just have to decide, I don't believe that. I'm sorry, I don't believe in it anymore. It's like the end of the movie Labyrinth. Again, another 80s reference, but at the end of the movie, she's in this, big, incredible journey, and she feels like she's trapped. And the words that she says that set her free is, you have no power over me. And as soon as she says that, the whole illusion snaps and breaks.
I love that analogy. And that's a great movie. Total classic. Like, that's so fascinating, because I think these limiting beliefs, either, like you said, it could have been something simple like a side eye, or like the expression your mom gave you without even realizing that it like basically crushed this dream you had. Also, then we have those people in our lives who did tell us we weren't good enough, and no uncertain terms, maybe outright or subliminally. But just because one person says this or a few people says this, versus it is fascinating when you think about all the positive feedback we do get, and yet it's like it doesn't have that same hold on us, like the limiting beliefs. So I love that idea of breaking it down and really questioning it, like, where's the evidence? And then let's compare it to the positive feedback we've gotten. And usually there's a lot more of that than there is the negative. And let's compare and contrast it. And so I really, really love that. From here, I'd love to ask you, so I know you do a lot of different things. So,
Yes.
Here, but do you feel like you found your purpose and mission in what you're doing with your life right now, and the work you're putting out there?
Yeah, I find that, yes. And I love purpose. I was just talking to some friends about this, because a lot of the ways that I sort of market or talk to the world about what I do is about finding your purpose. And funnily enough, I find it's not that resonant with most people. And it made me laugh, because I have a good friend, loves the work I do, but she was like, yeah, nobody cares about their purpose. And I was like, like, what are you talking about? I find that it takes sort of you have to be in a sort of special space. Like you're in a different level when you're thinking purpose. So I love that you're asking this question, because it's dear to my heart, because yes, everybody has a purpose. And I believe that you are so deep in your purpose, you couldn't even tell your life from your purpose. That's how intertwined it is. So there is a lot of philosophies around purpose. I don't see it as necessarily a job, but really like, what am I being called to do today? A lot of times, my concern or my purpose feels to be of service. I really do want to be of service in whatever way I'm being asked to be of service. Right now, I would say this is my purpose, is talking to you and having these conversations and connecting, and maybe helping each other see that, yeah, this is something that's typical. It's sort of part of the job, especially when you're doing something that isn't so rote. It's not the norm, right? There's not a well-defined path for this energy work, or doing intuitive work, or tarot, or anything that we're doing that's sort of more esoteric. If I were to compare it to an element, it's very air based. Like, what do we do when we feel like it's so light and etheric and it's mercurial and it moves so easily? It's hard to define, which can make it harder for ourself to find grounding in it. We actually have to bring grounding to this work in order for us to feel more secure in it. And man, do we face a lot of backlash. I mean, you'll be called nuts, woo woo, you're automatically sort of pigeonholed by some people as having a screw loose, or that you're working, you seem like a good person, but you're going to hell. I get that a lot, right? You get a lot of sort of religious backlash sometimes with the work that we're doing, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and that's usually on purpose, because tools like the tarot, for example, they're not cultish, I think, like people believe that they are. They're not tools of the dark. They were originally a set of imagery given to us from higher dimensional beings to help us understand the spiritual journey and all the stages that we go through. And it wasn't meant for one class of people, meaning like it wasn't meant for just the priest class or elites to have. It's for everyone. It's a way to activate your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind works with feelings and it works with symbols and it works with imagery. It does not use language. Just like if you were, one of the things I do is I do animal communication. Animals don't communicate with words. They're communicating with like imagery. They're showing you things and they're telling you how it feels when they're communicating with you, right? So the tools like the tarot, like what you're using, are tools that are meant for everyone. But of course, we're meant to make it feel like it's something wrong, right? And so you're going into an area where there's a lot of stigma already. There's a lot of misunderstanding, and it weirdly, you'd think we'd evolved enough, but there's always going to be opposition, and it's not something that's giving you grounding. So you really have to learn how to bring that to the situation and sort of help yourself navigate through these times. And that's why getting to know yourself, getting clear about that, I believe, is a big part of people's purpose, is like, get to know yourself. The clearer you are on who you are and what your intentions are, the easier it is to navigate through that negative terrain or the pushback that you're going to get. The pushback without the grounding of who you are, it's going to push you out of your center. Whereas if you're centered in yourself, if you understand your purpose, whatever you mean, take that to mean. Again, for me, it's like, what am I meant? Where am I meant to be now? Like, what's calling me now? And what is it calling from me? Right? To be here with you, to be of service, to share my story, to provide a service to those who are listening, and maybe some understanding on some things that they're also feeling but don't have the words for. That feels like the purpose in the moment. Very grounded in myself and who I am, which allows me to move forward on the path I desire. No matter what the pushback is, I always sort of bounce back into center.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
I love that answer. And I love how you basically took this big idea of purpose, where a lot of people immediately assume it's something you do, like a job. Yeah. Right? And I think that that's probably the biggest confusion around it, versus, and changing it to, no, what are you doing right at this exact moment? How are you treating your family when you're with them, or your friends? How are you treating other people when you're out and about? When you're like in every single moment, what are you being called to do? And I love that, because it breaks it down to, how are you showing up for you? which will, if you're in alignment, now you're showing up in service to other people in the way that you're supposed to. And when I say supposed to, I know some people are like, there's the shoulds, right?
Mhm.
I love this saying, stop shitting all over yourself. So it's not
Yeah.
like, it's not like another box to step into. And I say what you're supposed to, it's like, you'll know when you're called into it. It's just going to feel like you, and it's going to feel like what you're, it's going to feel right and aligned. So I love how you did break down this big idea into something like, how are you every single moment?
I just want to add to it. You're saying something that I just want to add to. You'll know when you're in your purpose at the moment. So, for example, let's say you're laying on the couch watching TV and it doesn't feel good. It feels like you're avoiding something, it feels like you're trying to escape. You'll know from that kind of feeling you're not in your purpose. It is not your purpose right now to sit there like a lump and watch TV, although that's what you're doing. So purpose is similar to sort of like that feeling of having a conscience, right? Like there's something I'm supposed to be doing. Your purpose, when you're doing it, you'll feel good. It'll feel centered. It'll feel like this was the right choice, right? So we don't always live our life just because you're thinking about where am I right now? Who am I with? Doesn't mean you're just doing your purpose, because unless you feel that alignment, you could very much be choosing something that's not your purpose, right? So if you're with someone, let's say, and you get into, they say something to you and it hurts your feelings, but you don't express it, and then you start to feel off around them, that would be another indicator that I'm off my purpose, right? Maybe my purpose right now is to state a boundary, and just let someone know that was crossing the line for me. I need to let you know that because I want us to stay, I want us to stay in harmony. So that those are just a few examples of how you can tell if you're in or out of purpose, because it's easy to, I mean, I did this early on when I understood this philosophy I'm talking about, and I'd be like, my purpose is to lay here right now and scroll through, scroll through Instagram. That's my no, it might be, but if it doesn't feel good, if you're not like resonating with it, then there's something else that's actually more purpose driven for you in that moment.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And it's so interesting because and I've shared this before, like when I do readings, it's the one time I feel like I'm plugged in. I can't explain it. It's like I'm one with the universe. Everything feels good. And it's that connection and that's sharing the message and knowing that it's landing and seeing the difference it's making, like all of that. It just feels so me. And then when I'm not plugged in, I feel a little bit aimless and lost and trying to find that. But I at least have that, compass of that right there. When I do a reading, when when I feel plugged, it's this idea of being plugged in. And so, but I love what you just explained, because that could be a really good navigation system that I'm actually take notes on that one for myself, just because, when I'm not doing readings, that's when I feel a little bit disconnected. I'm trying to reconnect, but I only know how to fully do it during readings or like meditation. But like out in the world, I think that that's a really good navigation system to know, like, am I around people that make me feel good, that support me? Am I in environments that feel good, that support me? Why am I scrolling on Facebook? I mean, sometimes, yes, it's okay to rest, but when you know that you're just, like you said, doing it to escape. So I know that you do so much, but we already kind of talked about how we were going to focus more on like the intuitive aspects and how you help people trust their intuition and trust themselves. What is a major struggle that you see a lot of your clients and people struggle with in the intuitive realm, as far as trusting themselves and listening to their intuition? And then what's an advice that you would give to someone who might be struggling with that too?
Yeah, so it really is very similar to everything we've been talking about. It's a self-limiting belief. So our beliefs act like a gateway for us. We are, like I said before, we're the creators of our own reality. So we're actually plugging in the program as we go, and we're following along. And everything that we say, everything we tend to believe on a deep level, we will prove to be true. We will make sure that that's the truth that we receive. So if you don't believe you are intuitive, you will actually sort of create an external experience that reflects that back to you. You're right, you're not intuitive. So this idea that somehow it's going to break through your limiting belief, unfortunately, it acts more like a stopper. Or imagine this, your intuition is like a light switch. When you believe in it, you're switched on, and when you don't, you switch it off. So could you live a life where you didn't believe you were intuitive and then suddenly switch it on? Absolutely. Absolutely. But until you believe it's possible, it's like that switch has a blocker on it and it can't move up. So part of it is, where's your current belief system at? If you believe that only some people have this, that there's only some people that get these special gifts and everybody else is just normal, then you're going to hold that outside of the realm of your personal experience because your belief system is very strong. So one of the things that I do to help people sort of break that apart is point out that actually our intuition was given to us as a survival toolkit. They are, your intuitive senses are literally extensions of your physical senses. So for example, you have eyesight that translates into clairvoyance, the ability to see that which isn't there. Everybody can do this. Everybody thinks it depends on, now again, how are you interpreting clairvoyance? Are you interpreting it as getting visions of the future, which a lot of people interpret it that way? But clairvoyance means clear sight, meaning I'm able to see in my mind that which isn't in front of me. So if I asked you right now, and for the people listening, can you picture your car without seeing it? Can you see your car? Yeah. Okay. Can you now see yourself sitting in your driver's seat? Can you see the interior of the car?
Yes.
Yeah. You can see the colors and you can see what's on the dashboard and how it's laid out. You can look down and see your transmission and how that shifts. You can see the parking brake. I mean, you can see the color of your seatbelt. All this is coming back to you now. You're not looking at it, right? But you can visually, you're getting little shots of, yep, I can see, I know the color. I can see the weather. Like look through your, windshield. What's the weather look like? As you're looking through your windshield right now, you'll see weather, right? You'll see what you're sitting in front of. Are you sitting in front of your house? Are you sitting at the grocery store parking lot? Like you can pull up a lot of information. That's clairvoyance, this ability to sort of like cognitively withhold. It's not just a memory, but it's the ability to see it in detail. That's clairvoyance right there. So that's an example of a psychic extension to your physical sensory system. We get these and that match all of our five senses. There's a psychic extension to that. Now we need these. Why? Because they help us determine what's going to keep us safe. I mean, we needed these a long time ago. When you heard a rustling in the bush eons ago, you would have to picture, okay, what is that? How, you'd have to get tuned into the sound. How big does it sound? What direction is it coming from? Do I hide or run? All of this is psychic information that was being given. It's intuitive information given to help you make a decision on how to move forward. So we all have access to it. But again, will you be able to access it at will? Yes, if you believe you can. If you don't, if you're saying, nope, that's only some people that can do it, again, we cut off the ability.
I love how you just kind of broke that down almost in a scientific way. You kind of broke it down in a very easy to understand. And it's so funny, like, I guess I've always assumed clairvoyance was more like the vision, where you're seeing something and, and I've always kind of felt like I'm not very good at visualization. But when you asked me if I could picture my car, I mean, I was like, dang, I'm picturing that pretty well.
I bet you saw the weather. I bet you saw what you were looking through your windshield at. I bet you had very detailed information coming in, didn't you?
They did. Strangely enough, it was raining, but it's not raining here. So
see, but that's something that, again, that's a sensory information that's coming from another point in time, maybe. And again, we can look at this. Some people look at that and they go, that's memory. I just have a great memory. Okay, but you're still able to visualize it. Now, this information, I'm also a QHHT practitioner. For those who don't know what that is, that's quantum healing hypnosis therapy. And that's that was pioneered by Dolores Cannon, who is another type of mentor of mine. I love Dolores Cannon, but she helped us understand that for people who what's usually happening here when we're struggling with our intuitive senses is we're really stuck in our left hemisphere. When we're stuck in the left hemisphere, we don't have access to esoteric or abstract information. We have access to everything that's very material and right in front of us right now. Like you could, analyze the space that you're in. You can analyze the weather that you're having. You can think about, like, what did I do yesterday and how is it helping me today and what do I need to do today to move forward? These are all very analytical things, right? But there's a lot of people who get stuck in that hemisphere. They get stuck in the left side of the brain. And unfortunately, when you're stuck in the left side of the brain, you do not have access to this spiritual realm, which is accessed through our right hemisphere.
Yeah, I think that that's probably one of my biggest struggles. Like I said, when I do readings, I feel like I'm plugged in, definitely on the right side, but day to day, I'm very much, I like evidence. I like evidential stuff, but I know that that's not, I also logically understand faith is when you believe it to see it, but logically, I want to see it to believe it.
You bring up a great point. I would say that a lot of people I work with also struggle with needing to see the proof before they'll take the action. And that's kind of how we're trained in this world, but we're trained backwards. And why? I mean, there's probably a nefarious reason, but nevertheless, we're trained backwards to expect the proof before we take the action. And really, the way energy works is action creates a result. No action taken, no result will appear. So everybody, when they're working intuitively, is looking for proof before they've done the thing that would create the very proof they're looking for.
That just totally makes me think of how I read the strength card and in tarot. And so the way that I read some of the cards are a little bit different than traditional, but the way that I read the strength card is upright. It's, you're being encouraged to just find that inner strength and move, like just move. It's important to be moving no matter what. And then when it's reversed, it's basically like you're afraid to move because you don't want to make the wrong move. So you're not moving at all. And I like to use the analogy of a swamp versus a stream. So it's exactly what you're saying. If you don't take the action because you're waiting for the proof, guess what? You're the swamp. And
you're stagnating. Yeah.
And then when when you decide to take action to let the proof kind of prove itself as you move, like when I get the strength card reverse and I can tell that there's this fear of moving, there's a fear of making the wrong move, I always like to tell them it's okay if you make the wrong move. Let's say you move and it's not ideal. Cool, now you can course correct, but at least you're moving. So that's just I love that explanation because I can correlate to something and that helps me understand that importance a little bit better.
Well, we're actually talking about one of the universal laws. So one of the universal laws is the law of action, which basically states nothing happens if nothing happens. So the way we interpret it, like in our culture, is like you get what you give. So you have to give something to get something back out. It's energy out equals energy in. So a lot of times when people are looking for proof, it's pre-action. They have not put the energy in to find out what they're going to get back. So one way to look at it is faith, I guess, but really it's just the law of energy. If nothing moves, nothing moves. Nothing's going to happen. So you actually have to create some sort of reaction in the universe in order for something to happen. So you've got to do it to get the proof, if there's proof to receive.
That makes sense. I've definitely heard that the law of action is a lot always tied into like manifestation, right? And
well, it's funny because with like people who are into the law of attraction, for example, that's one of the laws of the universe, which means that when you are in alignment, the thing that you are asking for, if you align to it, you will receive it. But a lot of people leave the action part out, and that's still a universal law. It's like, nope, just because you're asking for it and you're aligning to it, yes, alignment is part of the action, but you may be required to do more action to make it come in. And then, of course, skeptics would say, well, that's not the law of attraction, and that's just working and getting a result. But it's like, but yeah, except you're getting the result you desire versus a random result. The law like of attraction, for example, is stating intent. This is what I want. What do I need to do to get it? Where do I need to be mentally? So if we go back to intuition and developing that, if you want to access more of your intuition, you're going to have to look at your mental alignment to it. Do you believe that you're intuitive? Do you give yourself permission to access it? And if you're honest with yourself and you're like, I really do want it, I'm just afraid I don't have it. Okay, so the belief is you don't have it. That's okay. Just acknowledge that and then work through that. Go, okay, I didn't believe I had it, but what if it's possible? That what if opens the door a crack. Now something can come through. And what if I gave myself permission? Then now the doors open a little bit more. You can open it back up. But again, the belief system around it, and specifically you, when it comes to intuition, do you believe that it's held apart from you like I used to believe when I was younger? Even though I was living it, I still separated myself from it because I was waiting for, no, someone's going to tell me that this is mine. And I was desperate for someone to say it. I was looking, and I went to psychics and stuff like that. Never fully got the like, yeah, you've got this. And I think, oh man, if they're not saying it, and some of them weren't saying it because they were in ego, or that, they want that story of, yes, I'm special and you can't do what I do. And then others who were very good were like, you can absolutely do this. Let me show you how. Right. So again, you have to consider the source it's coming from. And is there an intention behind it to help you access it or to hold you out of it so that they can maintain their own ego?
Yeah, I think for myself personally, I feel so plugged in with my tarot, but when I'm outside of my tarot, I think there's this belief that it's more that I don't trust myself. It's like the things that come to me, I'm like, that's just my mind being weird. And that's the belief is I'm not going to even try because I'm afraid to follow it, which is so hypocritical because again, when I'm plugged in and I'm reading for my clients, I trust it fully, that I haven't given myself permission to trust it and trust myself yet.
You're on the journey. You're going to deepen it. You're getting ready to go there. So I remember being at that stage, and that's where I had more trust in my tools than I had in myself. My tools were the gateway, right? And my team in spirit was very loving about that. They were like, we're going to let you have your tools right now and have that little safety, but I'm just giving you a heads up. We're going to pull that away from you because we're going to put you in a lot of situations where people are going to put you on the spot and ask you information. And now you don't have your tools. So what are you going to do? And every time I was put in that scenario and I just went into, I don't have to, how did I do it? I would go into, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be wrong. Nobody's expecting me to be perfect. I don't always have to have the answer. I just need to relax and trust what comes. And I'm telling you, the more you can relax and just trust what comes, it's like you let go of the outcome. You really have to learn to let it go. Are you going to be 100% right? No, but guess what? No, intuitive is 100% right. And that's because there are multiple timelines playing out. What you're usually seeing is the most probable timeline for whatever the scenario is, whatever that person's on or whatever the situation is sort of happening on. You're seeing that. Can other timelines happen? You bet. You bet they can. All it takes is one choice to switch over to another timeline. So part of it, as you mature and you go deeper into your gifts, is simply letting go of needing to be right and just relaxing. I'm just going to trust them. I don't know. I'm at the human level here. I know I don't have the biggest picture, but my team has a better picture than me and they're giving me information. So why not trust it?
I think that that's a big part of it, is that fear of being wrong. When I have my cards in front of me, and it's so funny you said that about the removing the tools. I've been feeling that. Like, I feel like, because especially with, I know I've shared a little bit about this podcast. There's something else that kind of came through with the podcast, these new ideas, these new offerings that are coming through that still include my tarot, but they were very very clear. My guides, when they told me I need to start a podcast and they told me that there's more I'm supposed to do, they were very clear. I am not a tarot reader. It's just the tool that I use, that I'm do more. And I still haven't quite, I think I'm afraid. And it is that fear of being wrong. It's that fear of like, I don't want to be a fraud or an imposter. So I'd rather, if I have my tools, then I can trust that. I think it's going to be a bit of a leap of faith, but yeah, this is all really great information that I'm like soaking in right now. From here, I'd love to shift to what I love to call synchronicity story time. And I love stories of synchronicity, things falling into place, the breadcrumbs, all of it. So, do you have any fun synchronistic stories that you could share, or at least, one story that's maybe paranormal and that you can't explain? I'd love to hear it.
Well, I was thinking about that earlier, and then I got my answer because I was like, oh my gosh, Sarah, like, because she had messaged me and asked me, like, do you have any? So I was like thinking about it. I'm like, guys, nothing is coming up. Like, I don't know what to tell her. There's so many weird things I could say, but none of them felt resonant. And then when I went to log into this Zoom meeting, she had provided me with the link, and I went to click on it, and it opened some weird window, and I realized I'm going to need to get the meeting number and the password to just go into Zoom, and because I couldn't get that link to open right. And I realized that was all by design. My team was like, hee hee hee, because because when I first started really, again, so I was using tools just like Sarah. I was very trusting in my tools, and I'd hear my team and talk to them, but I didn't really, at the time I was like, what's your name? Like, I needed names, and they were like, that's not really how we operate. I'm like, well, then what are you? Like, it was one of these things where you kind of cling to what's familiar. And they're like, we'll let you know it's us. And what I'd started getting was the number 44, just 44s everywhere. It would be 11:44 a.m. or it would be something would come to $44.44. And then it was 44s on license plates. And I'd be watching a TV show and they'd start a timer and it would be 44 minutes. And I'd be like, so every time I see the number 44, I always say, hi team, hi, I'm like always acknowledging them. And what I find is when you do that, what they're looking for is the easiest way to contact you and let you know they're there. So when you acknowledge it, they'll bring you more and more. So I get 44s all the time. And so I'm constantly saying hi to them. And getting back to logging in, when I went to have to log into this Zoom meeting, one of the set of numbers for the room was 44. And I was like, hi guys. So just to get into this interview, I had to type in the number 44. So 44 is considered a master number, and it's also considered the earth angel number. And I love it. Every time I see it, I feel so loved and supported. And I know for some people, it's such a random thing. It means nothing to them. But when you identify sort of like your calling card with your higher self, with your team, and it shows up anytime I need, like when I'm having a hard day, they'll like pop in 44, like someone will message me at like, and it'll be 44-second message and things like that. And it's usually something I need to hear. But your team is always looking for the easiest way to get your attention. They're not going to make it hard. They're going to make it super easy. And when you start acknowledging them, they will show you how present they are in your life and how much they're working on the other side on your behalf.
I love that story and how relevant it was to the show. That's so cool. I'm still very new to I know of one guide and I have his name. It's Michael. I know there's more, but I don't really, just being able to connect with him it was out of the blue because I've been wanting to connect with a guide. And then I noticed in the last like year or two, I do when I'm not doing my business or podcasting, I do DoorDash. So I'm on the road a lot. And there were times where I would be like pondering some kind of a struggle or something. And I'd get this really profound, like messages that I just kind of felt like I was sitting in class for. And I just kind of assumed it was like my higher self. And I'm like, oh, I got to listen to whatever this brainwave is. And I would listen and listen. And then during a spirit circle I did about maybe 7-8 months ago, the lady who ran it happened to bring singing bowls. And during one of the meditations, she was, tapping the singing bowl, and the frequency did something to me. I mean, I almost started crying, and like something like shifted. And then on my way home from that, I heard that same voice I'd heard plenty of times before, except this time it was like introducing some in a way that was separate from like before. I thought it was just a part of me. Then it was like, oh, by the way, we've been here. You weren't ready to understand that, we're your guide. And so I got the name Michael, and I've also had dreams with him in it too. I think that we probably had past lives together, but I don't know much more than that. Like it's still very, I feel so crazy out of my mind. I'm like, my guide said,
Oh,
so
no.
like, okay, it's normal, it's okay.
Oh,
So
it's so normal for me now that I talk like that around people that might not know what I'm like, my team says, and they're just like, huh? Like, what team? I'm like, oh, my spirit team. And they're like, okay. But because I'm so comfortable with it, and I'm so, I'm serious about it, I'm comfortable with it, and I'm not in that place of like shame or embarrassment or doubt. It just is that it's usually pretty accepted. Like, people just question it for a second, then they realize that's my lingity, right? Like, they're like, that's how Therese talks. And so they're very interested in it. But your team, yeah, everybody has a team, by the way. We're given what I love to call 24-hour tech support, is kind of a great way to think about it, is that you have a spirit team with you. You usually have like at least one who's a prominent guide, like you would say, like your main guide. But as we've gone through this process of ascension, and I know that's like another topic for another time, but we've gathered more and more around us. We need more technical support, is a way to say it. And the way I like to explain it to people is because some people have asked me, well, if I had guides, why wouldn't they let themselves be known? And I said, well, you can go through an entire life not knowing they're there, because the way tech support on this planet works, like if you had a technical issue, they don't call you and go, hey, how's your computer doing? I'm just really worried, and like, I just want to check in on you. That's not how tech support works. You call them when you need something. So they're 24 hours, 7 days a week, waiting for you to talk to them. They're never going to interfere with your life, or unless you were in like serious danger and they had permission to sort of intervene. For the most part, they'll send you like little love bumps and feelings, but as far as like reaching out to you, their job is to support you. So unless you want support, they're just silently hanging out with you. Now they've told me they said, imagine sitting by, your job is to sit by a phone all day and wait for a call, and how bored you might feel like not getting called. So they were like, you call us as much as you want. In fact, there's no question too small that they wouldn't be happy to assist you on. And they often remind me that I don't call enough. Like, I don't ask for enough, ask for more. And so many people are afraid to ask for divine assistance or help. Like, we've been conditioned to think that only when we're in dire emergencies should we access this ability. And they're like, absolutely not. Call us as much as you want. This is my only job, is to sit here and support you and give you, help. But I have to wait for you to call me. So I'm bored. Call me. Call me.
there's a book that I'm reading I told you about, and I still didn't get the name of it, but it's supposed to be one of the best channeling books that's recommended. That's all I can tell you though about it. But one of the things they talk about is like how we are all assigned a guide, and then we have higher guides that we can speak to, which is probably like the team. I read like the guide that's with you, they're in a different frequency than like the high guides or something.
Yeah, there's rings. So you could kind of think about it as like your inner circle is like I have 3 guides in my inner circle that are very close, but one is still slightly more in front of those 2. So that's like your immediate response team right there. Then you've got the higher guides, which include like ascended masters that come in because you're calling them in. Like, I want to learn from Buddha. I want to learn from Jesus. I want to learn from, whoever it is that you're feeling called to learn from. Then they kind of come in closer to you. You also have angels, right? You have guardian angels around you that are there for your divine protection. And then you can call in the archangels and higher angels to sort of come in and support you. And so there are, you almost see it like there's beings that are coming in and out when you're around certain people. Sometimes more come in because maybe you need more support, or because there's a divine synchronicity happening, and that they're there to sort of witness and support that. But yeah, your main team or your closest guides are with you 24/7. So whenever I call in somebody's team, when I'm asking to speak to the spirit of someone, calling in their guides, their angels, their ascended masters, their higher self, of course, that's another part of your spirit team, and then source energy. So I'm calling in every level of that person when I do a reading with them to get the most accurate information I can.
That makes sense. And I think I'm just barely starting to open up to just my small circle, but it has helped when I have called on them. Like there was actually a time very recently. So I kind of pulled away from talking to them because again, I was kind of like, am I just crazy? So I just kind of like pulled away a little bit, but fairly recently, it was probably like 3 weeks ago. So it's Pride Month. And I'm a big supporter of that. And I got in a small debate, loving debate, because I just kind of kept coming back to Jesus is all about love and acceptance and compassion. Like I just kind of kept coming back to that because that was like, especially talking to someone who's very religious, I was just like, can we just focus on that?
Right.
The other person was again, it was a respectful debate, but their stance was making me extremely angry. And I remember I was just like, I had to go run an errand and I was like physically like shaking. Like I was very upset. And I was just like, oh, and I'm like, why am I so upset over this? Like, this is stupid, So I finally was like, I called on Michael and my guy, and I'm like, why am I so angry about this? Help me out here. Help me find some grounding. And I was actually really surprised by what came through. Like, first thing I heard was, you're not going to change their mind. That's not your job. And I heard that there's plenty of more like them. So me fighting is not going to do anything. And basically what I heard was the best thing that you can do. And it was so funny because they immediately correlated my business because it also has a stigma to it, right? In its own way, pride and tarot, like they both are very much an abomination in that particular sense.
Right.
And the best way that you can support this group of people, fighting is not going to do anything. Debating isn't really going to be helpful because, and then it was so interesting too, because that's the thing that when you're talking to someone that's of light and of love, they're not going to be judging. There was no judgment. They also said, this person is speaking to you with good intent. I know you don't see it that way because that doesn't align with you, but they are telling you this from their own good intentions. And, this is their belief, just like you have your belief. And so that was kind of a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. We're all working out of our own belief system. So what I heard was, and it kind of came back to this idea of what we've already been talking about of owning what I do. And I heard you need to own what you do unapologetically, which will give other people permission to do the same. And that's how you can support this community and other communities. It just was like, okay. And then I wasn't angry anymore. It was like all of that just away. And I was like, man, I need to call on you guys more often because that was just it was not in my realm of thinking. I was just angry. And then I just got this loving message of it's, first of all, they acknowledged where I came from, but they also were like, you're not going to change their mind. This is how you can support. And it was more about what I could do for myself and for other people. And yeah,
so I would say that's how it's coming from a higher energy, because notice how the team was not supporting your ego, right? And saying you're right, they're wrong. That's how it's coming from a higher power, because again, they're right. They're coming from a different perspective. It's not the perspective you share, but it doesn't mean it's coming with a negative intention or an intention to harm. It's just another perspective. And they've had long talks with me about how to see perspective and how to not fear opposing perspective, because the idea of right is very much a divisive idea that was implanted here to keep people separated. We're all one. Even the people that you're like, oh, I can't get into what your perspective is, or I can't get into what you believe, or like certain things make your skin crawl, and yet they're still connected to you. And you'll always know when you're hearing information or advice from a higher entity, because they will always speak to the oneness and also to focus on you, right? So a lot of times the ego wants to control the environment, and they want to control other people around us. And so, it's a positive message from a higher source when it's not encouraging the ego to be divisive or to play the right and wrong game, but rather to help you see that there's something else here, and there is a connection between you and them, and you're both trying to get to the same place. You're trying to get to a place of love and harmony. You're just coming at it from different directions. And when you recognize that, again, you dissolved ego in that moment, and you moved out of anger because you moved up in frequency, and you got out of any kind of divisiveness that's very easy to fall into. And especially during this time, we are in a very divisive time, and there are a lot of traps to keep people separated, when the very thing that everyone wants is to unify. And we're going to have to find it within our own heart first before we're going to see it in the world. And it's little moments like that where you just helped us get closer to creating unity in the world by finding unity in your heart. So you should be really proud of yourself for that moment.
I'm just grateful that that helped me build more trust, because of exactly what you said. I felt like I was being schooled. I felt a little bit like I was being put in my place, but it was in a loving way. It wasn't in a shame. It was in a, let's look at this from a different perspective and, be more open. And so it's like, okay. So yeah, I love this. So this conversation has been wonderful. It has gone on for quite a while. And so we do need to start coming to a close. How can our listeners find you and work with you, or listen to your podcast or your book, any of the things you offer?
Yeah, so as we've stated before, there's a lot of stuff I'm doing out in the world, but I will give you a couple of helpful resources to find me and start connecting with my work if it resonates for you. The first thing you can do is visit my website. That's blythestarlight.com. It's BLYTHE starlight, all one word.com. And you can see everything I offer there. You can also visit me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel at Blythe Starlight, and I do weekly karma card readings where I read the energy for the week, and I give you kind of a heads up about what my spirit team is asking us to focus on for the week, and the energies that are happening, like planetary as well as ascension type energies, and we can connect there. You can also find me on iTunes or Spotify, pretty much every podcasting platform, on the Modern Mystic Soul podcast. And I do episodes every week, including channelings that I have been receiving from the Arcturian Council, which is another topic we will get into maybe someday. But those are very high-level channelings that are coming through about the process humanity is going through at this period of time, helping us to focus on getting into the highest frequency that we can so that we can create the harmony and unity we are looking for in this world. Also getting to talk to amazing people like Sarah and others, where I'm also doing interviews and just talking about different aspects of spirituality and spirit, what's going on over there, and how people connect to it. So if you're interested, check out those resources. And if you'd like to work with me personally, again, go to my website, blythestarlight.com. I do one-to-one coaching, and I do help people get out of the self-doubt and limiting beliefs and into a clear success mindset and self-trust. So they can go deeper into their intuition and consciously build the lives and the businesses that they desire to experience.
Perfect. I will be sure to put all of that in the show notes so they can find you. And I'll definitely have to have you back on to talk about what you were just touching on. It's a whole other out of this world topic, but
it's very out of this world.
But it's one that definitely fascinates me, and I'm sure my listeners as well. So we'll definitely, I'll definitely have to have you back for that. you know, I know a lot of listeners probably have followed with some of the woo woo, but this is a different version of that. But just,
It's the galactic
it's so funny when it
woo-woo.
comes to like galactic woo woo. And it's so funny because up until probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was always kind of on the, aliens, like it just didn't, but then I started hearing it in the spiritual sense. And I was like, hold on, that makes sense. That actually resonates. That feels about right. I don't think I'm a starseed. I know that there's a whole, we'll talk about that. I have a hair appointment to get to. So
It's your hair appointment.
So I don't think I'm a starseed. Like that doesn't resonate with me. I think maybe I've been like, probably earthbound, but I totally believe in it and all the things I'm learning and hearing. And I'm like, this sounds right to me. So I definitely, would love to have you on so we can dive in further. This has been such a great conversation. I mean, obviously we're still talking an hour and a half later. This has been wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom.
Yes, Sarah, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such a privilege and an honor to be here and connect with you and just sort of talk through these things. And I truly hope that for whoever's listening who feels like they're supposed to be part of maybe a more intuitive community or follow this path, I just want you to know that it's absolutely open to you. No one's stopping you. And the only thing that gets in your way is just those self-limiting beliefs. And hopefully today's episode will give you a chance to sort of reconsider those and give you the strength and the power to maybe break through your own glass ceiling.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.